November 12, 2025, the world wakes up to a headline that will send shockwaves across North America and beyond. The US-Canada alliance, long considered unbreakable, now faces its gravest crisis, not over oil, not over trade, but over something even more fundamental: water. On one side, the parched, sun-baked landscapes of the American West, where rivers have shrunk to trickles and lake beds have turned to dust. On the other, the vast, shimmering lakes and rivers of Canada, a country blessed with nearly a fifth of the world's fresh water. President Trump, having returned to the White House in a stunning political comeback, steps up to the podium. With the eyes of the world watching, he demands that Canada export massive amounts of fresh water to the drought-ravaged American West. The message is clear: American cities and farms are on the brink, and only Canada's water can save them. The ultimatum lands like a thunderclap in Canada. Outrage erupts from coast to coast. In the streets, Canadians wave flags and carry signs declaring water a sacred trust, not a commodity to be sold or traded. News crews swarm Parliament Hill as politicians scramble to respond to the growing public fury. Meanwhile, US officials frame the demand as a matter of continental security. They paint a dire picture: American towns running dry, families rationing water, and once fertile farms turning to wasteland. The stakes, they argue, are nothing less than the survival of communities and the stability of the region. But for Canadians, the issue runs deeper than economics or even environmental stewardship. Many see this as a direct threat to their sovereignty, a hostile grab for a resource that defines their national identity. On the streets, citizens voice their anger and disbelief, vowing to defend their water at any cost. Behind closed doors, diplomatic channels are in overdrive. Negotiators shuttle between embassies, but public statements from both sides are sharp, uncompromising, and laced with warnings. The world watches as two allies teeter on the edge of a historic rift. The US hints at economic consequences if Canada refuses to comply. Rumors swirl of tariffs, trade restrictions, and financial pressure. The Canadian dollar tumbles on global markets, adding fuel to the fire of public anxiety. For generations, the idea of selling water has been taboo in Canada. Now, it's become a national flashpoint. Editorials warn of a slippery slope, and old protest footage resurfaces, reminding Canadians of past battles fought and won over their most precious resource. The demand from the US strikes at the very heart of what it means to be Canadian. Water is more than a resource, it's a symbol of the land, the people, and their shared future. The lakes and rivers that define the landscape are woven into the national story. Across the country, the public's reaction is a mix of shock, anger, and defiance. Social media explodes with calls to action. Protests swell outside government offices. For many, this is a line that cannot be crossed. This is no ordinary trade dispute. It's a battle over a resource many believe should never have a price tag. A test of national will, and a moment that could redefine the relationship between two nations. The world holds its breath as the pipeline ultimatum threatens to reshape the future of North America. President Trump unveils the American Water Security Act, demanding Canada approve a vast pipeline network to divert water south. The plan targets major Canadian rivers and lakes, promising billions for Canada and thousands of jobs. Trump offers trade concessions, but the message is clear. Water is now a US national security issue. The threat of sanctions or a trade war looms if Canada refuses. The act frames Canada's water as a continental resource, not a sovereign one. The administration bypasses diplomacy, appealing directly to the public with images of American suffering. By making it law, Trump forces Canada into a corner. It's a high-stakes gamble with the US-Canada relationship on the line. Canada's response is swift and resolute. Within hours of the American request, the government convenes an emergency session signaling to the world that this is not just another policy debate, but a defining moment for the nation. The Prime Minister stands before a packed Parliament, his voice unwavering as he declares that water is not a commodity to be traded, but a sacred public trust. He proclaims, Canada's water is not for sale at any price, to anyone, under any circumstances. He expresses deep sympathy for America's crisis, acknowledging the suffering south of the border. Yet, he makes it clear that compassion does not mean compromise. The pipeline proposal is rejected outright, with a firm and public refusal broadcast across the nation. Our lakes and rivers are the birthright of our children, he continues. We will not sell them, ever. They are part of our identity, our heritage, and our responsibility to future generations. The Prime Minister's speech electrifies the chamber. Members of all political parties rise in rare unity, applauding the decision. Across the country, Canadians celebrate, waving flags and expressing pride in their government's stand. Diplomats quickly move to frame Canada's stance on the world stage, emphasizing that this is not just about water, but about defending national sovereignty and upholding environmental stewardship. They argue that Canada has a duty to protect its natural resources, not just for itself, but for the planet. The government warns that allowing bulk water exports would set a dangerous global precedent, potentially opening the floodgates for other nations to exploit their own resources, with devastating consequences for ecosystems everywhere. The slogan, "Our water, our future," spreads like wildfire. Rallies erupt in cities from coast to coast, and social media is flooded with messages of support. Canadians of all ages join together, determined to protect what they see as a fundamental right. Canada's message to Washington is unambiguous, not just no, but never. Officials deliver the decision in person, and the world watches as tensions rise between the two allies. The country braces for a long, bitter standoff with its closest ally, as military vehicles quietly reinforce the border and headlines warn of an uncertain future. Canadians steel themselves for what may come, united in their resolve to defend their water at all costs. Water is woven into Canada's identity. This vast country holds 20% of the world's fresh water, a staggering share that shapes not only its geography, but also its culture and way of life. From the thundering waterfalls of the north to the tranquil, glassy lakes that dot the landscape, water is everywhere, forming the veins and arteries of the nation. Canada is home to millions of lakes and rivers, each one a thread in the fabric of the country's story. The canoe, an enduring symbol of exploration and connection, has carried Indigenous peoples and settlers alike across these waters for centuries. The Group of Seven, Canada's iconic artists, immortalize these waterways in their paintings, capturing the spirit and beauty of the land. Summer cottages nestled along quiet shores, families gathering by the water's edge, and the timeless tradition of paddling a canoe all reflect a deep, almost spiritual connection to water. For many Canadians, the idea of exporting water is unthinkable, like selling a piece of the national soul, a betrayal of something sacred. Canada's environment and economy are inextricably linked to healthy water systems. Hydroelectricity powers cities and industries, fishing sustains communities, and agriculture relies on clean, abundant water to thrive. The boreal forest, stretching across the country, depends on these waterways for its survival. Scientists warn that massive diversions or bulk exports could devastate fragile ecosystems, disrupt wildlife, and even alter regional climates, with consequences that could last for generations. For decades, there's been a rare, nonpartisan consensus among Canadians and their leaders. Bulk water exports are strictly off-limits. Laws and international agreements have been put in place to protect against large-scale diversions, reflecting a shared understanding that water is not just a resource, but a legacy to be safeguarded. When foreign leaders like President Trump demand access to Canada's water, it's seen as a disregard for this hard-won legacy and the values it represents. At stake is more than just policy. It's the very essence of what it means to be Canadian. Water is life, heritage, and identity, flowing through the hearts of people and the land itself. Indigenous peoples lead the opposition, viewing water as sacred and inseparable from their identity. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders declare they will never consent to water exports. Canadian law and the UN Declaration require their free, prior, and informed consent. Pipeline routes would cross traditional territories, threatening sacred sites and livelihoods. Indigenous communities vow legal and physical resistance, recalling past standoffs like Oka and Standing Rock. Their opposition is a formidable barrier, reminding all that water is not the government's to sell. It is under Indigenous stewardship, a responsibility they refuse to abandon. The American West is in crisis. Decades of mega-drought, shrinking rivers, and vanishing reservoirs. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at record lows. Farms are turning to dust, and cities ration water. Economic losses mount as agriculture collapses and rural communities face ruin. Urban areas impose strict conservation, while states battle over dwindling supplies. For many, The future is bleak: rationing, decline, even abandonment. This desperation fuels calls for a radical solution: Canada's water. Proponents see the pipeline as survival, accusing Canada of selfishness. They argue that true partnership means sharing resources in crisis. The West's desperation is the engine behind Trump's ultimatum. At the core, this is a clash of philosophies. In the US West, water is a commodity, owned, traded, and moved for profit. Water rights are property rights, and the instinct is to find new sources to appropriate. Canada sees water as a public trust, a collective inheritance to be protected, not sold. The government is a steward, not an owner. Selling water in bulk is viewed as a betrayal of future generations. Canada's abundance has allowed it to avoid commodifying water. The idea of exporting it for profit is anathema. This fundamental divide is why the two nations are talking past each other. Canada's refusal is rooted in deep fears: the slippery slope. Once water is exported, it may never stop. Trade law could force Canada to keep selling, losing control over its own resources. Environmental risks are immense. Diversions could devastate lakes, rivers, and the boreal forest. The ecological price could be irreversible. Sovereignty is at stake. Ceding control to the US would undermine Canadian independence. Canada fears becoming a mere reservoir for its neighbor. The economic benefits are outweighed by the risks. For most Canadians, the price is simply too high. The answer remains a firm no. With talks stalled, both countries turn inward for solutions. The US invests in water recycling, purification, and desalination to create new supplies. Cities like San Diego lead with advanced purification. California expands desalination. Farmers adopt efficient irrigation to save water. Canada, awakened by the crisis, works on a national water strategy and modernizes infrastructure. Scientific research maps and monitors water resources, preparing for climate change. Both nations realize water security depends on innovation, not conflict. The future of water lies in stewardship at home, not pipelines across borders.